Fantastic. So I'd just like to say welcome to everybody. Welcome to the Luminosity League. Tonight we've got a very special Luminosity League show on. We're being sponsored by Aftershoot and Aftershoot's Create Together program, which is absolutely awesome. So tonight I'm going to be talking about mastering photo culling, and I'm also going to be talking about why this sort of thing is really, really important, what it means to us, and why we need to get this stuff right and why we might be doing it wrong, you know. So look, just before I get started and just for full disclosure, hey, just because I do it one way, it doesn't mean to say that it's the right way to do it. Like I always say, there are many, many ways to do the same thing. Ultimately, I'm going to give a couple of methods tonight and I'm going to make some recommendations, but ultimately, it's very much up to you. Sometimes I think we need to find a workflow that works for our own special, unique needs. And as we as we progress through this, I think that you'll see, because I'm going to discuss why culling is going to be important for different types of photography. You know, you'll see, I think, that this is, yeah, this can be quite a challenge. So, look, I'm going to talk for around about 20 minutes. We're going to try and keep things within about 2 hours tonight. Also, this evening we've got a talk from our the wonderful Jim Karofsky, and he is going to be talking about painting with light, how to make your images pop. Jim, do you know what? Jim is so understated. He is the kind of chairman of 19, am I right in saying that, Jim? 19 photographic clubs at the minute. He's like honestly, he's
Yeah,
the boss. And yeah, he's going to be giving us a presentation tonight. Jim, would
sure.
you just like to quickly would you like to just briefly talk about it just before we go?
Sure. I mean, everybody's at a different place. And one of the things in one of the clubs that I work with, they wanted to know how they can make their photos look better, how they can make them stand out a little bit. And I for a long time have been trying to do the same things, trying to get my pictures to pop like we all do. And what I've noticed is people are generally very nervous about going too far with their photos. And they generally will go a certain amount and say, well, that's enough. And we're going to talk about why it's perfectly acceptable and the professionals are going much further than we are. And they're generally doing selective changing within their photos rather than doing a global kind of change of the whole photo. So tonight, hopefully, we're going to be able to talk about that a little bit, have people take a look at what you can do with today's programs. They're amazing. So we'll see if we can make people feel a little more comfortable about saying, yes, it's perfectly acceptable, and this is what the rest of the world is doing with their photos.
Awesome. Awesome. Thanks ever so much, Jim. You're an absolute star. Guys, I'm about to share the screen and I'm going to get started on mastering photo culling. Let me share this. Let me share the right screen. Excellent. Liz, just give me a nod. Are you seeing the PowerPoint slide? Excellent. Perfect. Excellent. Excellent. So yeah, guys, mastering photo culling from chaos to clarity. Let me oh see if I can move this forward. It'll just be oh no, there we go. Yeah, there we go. Fantastic. So it's really hard to talk about photo culling without talking about the evolution of photography in the first place. So, I got into photography probably back in around about 87, about 1987. And back then, if I went out and I shot I remember going to Wales with a good friend of mine once, and I took about 4 rolls of 36 film with me, or maybe 5 rolls, and I seem to remember that I shot 4 of them, you know? So yeah, 144 pictures. And I was like, whoa, whoa, that was a proper, this is over a few days. That was a proper session, you know? And, you know, it's interesting because with the onset of digital photography, digital photography has brought us many things. It's brought us some great advantages, and it's also brought us some serious challenges. And I think probably one of the biggest challenges that it's brought us is the amount of shots that we're able to take. And it doesn't matter whether it's on your camera or whether it's on your phone, we we are now, we've almost gone from one end of the spectrum to the other, maybe where, if you're an average person, you'd go out and maybe you'd shoot a roll of 36 film, or I'm sure that a lot of us remember quite a lot of people would just leave film in their camera and they'd pick it up and then it would get processed about once a year. So we've got Liz with us today. We've got a wonderful model, Liz, that I shoot with regularly. Um, The last shoot that I had with Liz, I think I shot, it was quite a light day for me. I think that I shot around about 700 pictures. Um, and with taking that amount of pictures, you've got to find a way not only of storing those pictures and, being rational about it, but you've also got to find a way of picking out what's good and what's bad as efficiently as you possibly can. Do you know what I mean? It's got to be efficient. And there are some there are some things that I've seen when I've worked with other photographers, or I've talked to other photographers about the things that they do. And if I just move this on, um, there are some photographers that they'll take thousands of shots and then they'll just store them and they'll never look at them again. Or maybe they'll just take one or two. It's almost like it's the equivalent of leaving money on the table. You know, there is an overwhelming volume of photos in sort of, I suppose, large sessions. It's time consuming to go through. If you've gone out or you've shot a wedding, let's just say, I'm going to pick a number of different things. So let's say you go out and you shoot a wedding. Now, because a wedding is quite busy, so you've got the wedding itself. In fact, you've got the bit before the wedding. You've got the wedding itself. You've got the reception. There will be all sorts of things going on all day, and photographers or wedding photographers will go round snapping at everything that they can, in order to give their clients, we hope, the experience, or like a visual experience of their big day. I'm gonna talk about something else. So, wedding photographers are probably going to take a lot of shots, but I'll tell you who I think might take way more shots than wedding photographers: wildlife photographers, birders, the sort of people that are going after animals or birds. Because, quite often when you've got the camera, you've got your Canon F5 with your 200 to 600 millimeter lens, and you've you're shooting at 20 frames a second, to catch that sort of golden squirrel eagle or whatever. I'm just kidding, golden eagle, just sort of in flight. And I get it. You're not. I've said this to Neil on here before. Did you get that shot with just one shot? And he's like, no, laddie. I'm sorry, I can't do the Scottish accent, but he said, no, basically I've got it through, taking a hell of a lot of shots as the birds are flying. So I think, it doesn't really matter, you might think, oh, well, do you know what, photo culling, it doesn't matter, but it's really, really important once you've got your images back to go through them and really decide, what am I going to keep? What am I going to just discard? And we'll come back to this. It's really important to maintain objectivity when you're sorting through images. And sometimes, just one final thing on this, sometimes, there are some photographers, I've watched some guys on YouTube, and they'll say things like, oh, we can go through, I don't know, 3,000 photos in 20 minutes. I don't believe that. I think, yeah, maybe you'll see some pictures that you like, but I mean, the problem is, I think if you're going through that fast, um, you've got the potential of making some mistakes and, maybe letting some images fall to the wayside that could have been really, really good. Anyhow, let's talk about an efficient way of culling manually. So I'm not going to talk in great detail about this because on a future slide, I'm gonna send all of these slides out to you guys. I'm going to give you a YouTube video to go and watch because there's a guy called Dwayne Patton he's made a really, really good YouTube video of he's just got like a really efficient system, well, sort of efficient, not 100%, but a good system for manually culling, and he uses a free program called XNView. You can download this. It's, there are lots of programs like this, but I think XNView is really very, very good. It's free, it's lightweight, it's a lightweight image viewer. You know, what this will allow you to do, it allows you to either use its standard hotkeys, so you can rank your photos by pressing control and hitting 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 to give your images stars. Or as Dwayne Patton will demonstrate in his YouTube video, you can actually modify the program so that you can just hit the numbers and it will give you, the star rating that you want. So you can use hotkeys, you can use tags. And one of the really, really good things about, culling manually is that you do get full control over the process. But along with that, you also get a much, much slower solution. So, I used to spend, oh my God, I'd come back from a shoot and I'd spend about 4 or 5 hours just culling, which was a nightmare. So this is Dwayne, and I thought because, I've mentioned him tonight. Whoops, let's get him back. Yeah, this is Dwayne Patton. And because I've mentioned him tonight, I thought I'd just give him a shout out because he's got some really interesting photography videos out there that are just, they're kind of general and they're kind of, but they're kind of helpful. He's this guy, he likes wildlife. So, I think there'll be a one or two of you that probably know him already. So his workflow, um, his workflow for XNView is you basically import your photos onto your hard drive and you back them up. So I just want to talk about YouTube for a second. I've seen lots of tutorials on YouTube where people will be talking about if they haven't got, say, like a mega fast, I don't know, they haven't got a mega fast PC. I have seen people start to cull using like SD cards or CF Express cards or what have you. Um, I mean, look, I can't speak to the validity of what I'm about to say, but I think that would be absolute lunacy, because if something happens to the images that you've taken on that card, there ain't no going back. So very, very simple. All right. I think to me, and this is just me, but to me, I'll bring my card back. I'll get it downloaded into my computer. I'll then again, this is just my backup process. I'll have a copy on my computer, and then I'll put a copy onto my NAS drive. So I'll get a copy on my NAS drive, and then I'll probably put one more copy onto a hard drive that is rarely ever used. It's like an external, um, yeah, just like an external hard drive. That's the first thing. And then, you open up your photos in the image folder of XNView. You use tags or stars to rate your images. So you're going through manually. One thing that Dwayne does that I've got to be honest, I'm not personally particularly fond of, he talks about going through thousands of shots very, very quickly, but he also talks about how he's rating them from 1 to 5. And for anyone who's tried to do this, I'm sure that you'll agree, it's one thing trying to make a decision sometimes. Do I like the photo that's in front of me? If you're trying to grade it into, like 1 or 5 categories, oh. So I tell you what I tend to do. I will have a quick skim through my actual images, and the ones that, pop out to me, I will immediately say, right, yeah, I like that, like that, like that, what have you. And if I find any that are rubbish, or if they're blurred beyond all recognition, or something's happened, then I will just, I'll just give, I'll just, I maybe I will just mark them with a 0. I must admit, I take the view that I'm not going to delete anything. Some people will say, you're better off just keeping the pictures that you want. Um, I'm, do you know what? If I had taken that philosophy some years ago, before things like Topaz AI, Topaz Sharpen, my God, I would have chucked out loads of pictures that I would have thought, I just can't bring these back. And now, because the technology has moved forward, I can. So I think it's very, very important to think about what you're going to consider keeping and what you're going to consider rejecting. You know, my personal view, very simply, is come back, upload your card, all right, and then go through it, and then maybe walk away and give yourself a few hours, because looking at the screen, aside from becoming square-eyed, you can become sort of, like, I call it snow blindness. You're just sort of, you're looking at so many images, you'll start missing things. So just give yourself a little break and then come back, is what I would do. So give yourself plenty of time. Obviously, with some disciplines, you can't do this. If you are a wedding photographer, for argument's sake, and you've promised the bride and groom that the pictures you took in the morning are suddenly going to be up at the reception, even if they're just proofs, maybe that's going to be a little bit different. With XNView will, it will look at your raw file, and it will look at the JPEG that's created by that raw file. So, you're not going to get a perfect view, but you'll get a view of how good your picture is. The great thing about XNView is that it will create XMP files, so it will create sidecar files that you can then transfer to Lightroom. And I know that there will be some people saying, well, hang on, wait a minute, Simon, why wouldn't you just cull in Lightroom? And look, I use Lightroom Classic. I can't speak for the one that's online, but Lightroom has got a horrible habit of rendering photos. I'm sure that there are ways around this, but to me, Lightroom is quite a slow process. I know that I'm not alone in saying this. So you can create these sidecar files. You can put the rankings in. You can get all of the photos you want, and then you can move them over to Lightroom, or the ones that you want over to Lightroom for further processing. So this brings me on to AI culling. So, I'm going to have to give him credit. Vanelli first put me on to Aftershoot. This would have been about, oh, I don't know, God almighty, it's almost 2 years ago. So I'm sure it was probably like January 23 or something. But Vanelli put me onto this company called Aftershoot. And at the time, Aftershoot had only just got started, and they had this amazing culling software. And what it will do, and once we finish this presentation, I'll open up my Aftershoot and I'll show you. But what it can do is you literally just load your files into it as soon as you've come back from your shoot, and you set Aftershoot going. You can set a wide variety of parameters on Aftershoot to say things like, okay, I want you to be really strict about images that look similar to each other. And I want you to find the best images Aftershoot. What Aftershoot will do, it will go out and it will look at the image that you've taken and it will compare it against millions of other images. So for example, millions of other images that have been successful on social media or what have you. And it will start categorizing your images, and it will categorize them in many different ways. I mean, in other words, it will pick out the ones that it thinks are absolutely staggeringly good. It will pick out all of the ones that it just considers good. It will pick out all of the ones that are blurred, or the ones where there are people with closed eyes, or weird expressions and that sort of thing. It's good. It's pretty damn amazing. You know. And the beauty of Aftershoot, it has a couple of little functions that I really appreciate. Um, when it looks at all of your images, it scans in all of your images very, very quickly. And if you can customize the process. So you can let the AI do as much as you want, or you can do as much as you want. If you want to leave it down to the AI, you can save yourself an awful lot of time. If you want to go through manually and sort of partly with the AI, it will allow you to do that too, which is, again, I think is awesome. The beauty about Aftershoot is nothing is lost with Aftershoot. You know, the process is automated, and I think one of the things that first really got me about this program was that it would show you how much time you saved every time you put a shoot through it. And after I'd racked up in excess of 100 hours, my God, you know, that's quite a lot. So I started using like Aftershoot on my collection, not just the new shots. I started using it on all of the old ones. And my God, I mean, Aftershoot has been nothing but awesome. I've got a little video here. I'm not going to play it online here, but um, again, when I send out the slides, you'll be able to go into this. And it actually shows, just see, I don't think no, it's not going to play. It shows Aftershoot in action, and it's like a speeded up version of how Aftershoot looks at your photos, and how, as you can see up here, it will show you close-ups of people's faces. So very quickly, and without having to play around, zooming in and all this sort of thing, you can get a good idea of how well focused people are. So, there are many, many solutions out there. There are many online solutions now. There are many manual solutions. I mean, I think the big one used to be Photo Mechanic, you know? Thing about Aftershoot, as compared to a lot of the solutions out there, you don't have to be on the internet to use Aftershoot. The actual processing takes place in your own computer, which is pretty damn amazing. Because there's nothing worse than you find yourself out in the middle of the wilderness. You're shooting brown bears or golden eagles or whatever it might be, or vultures, or I don't know, wildebeest, anything. And suddenly you've not got an internet signal. You're back at your log cabin, No internet signal. What are you going to do? Well, I tell you what, you won't have to worry with Aftershoot. You can still get your culling done. Even though if you've got no internet signal, you might not be able to transfer your photos out. But hey, save it. It will save you time. Oh yeah, that's true. The other thing, aside from automatically categorizing images, the culling process, depending on how many shots you've got, in my experience, if I've got about, I don't know, 1,500 shots, it will generally take about 10 minutes. And then what it will do, it will give me, a load of categorized shots, all in their own separate individual folders. And it will ask me what I want to do next. Do I want to go to Lightroom? Or, depending on, what you buy with Aftershoot, they've also got a functionality now that will actually process your pictures for you in one hit. And it literally is like you put them in, and very much like, I don't know, oh, I mean, there are lots of online and offline solutions now that are just like one-shot processors. Aftershoot Aftershoot goes a step further. It will look at your Lightroom catalog, and it will start to learn your style. Because bearing in mind, I think a lot of the processing is going on in your own machine, but it will learn your style. So I think this is awesome. So I've got a little comparison here. So manual versus AI. So just a side-by-side comparison. So look, if you do it manually, yeah, you can do it for free. And Aftershoot, right now, you can pick up a monthly subscription for Aftershoot for around about $8. And it goes up depending on what you want to do with it, or whether you're like a enterprise user or what have you. But actually, I think it's pretty cheap at half the price. Speed of manual processing is moderate, whereas the AI with Aftershoot is absolutely lightning fast. It's the accuracy is completely user dependent. This is what I'm saying about, it's all very well for people on YouTube saying, oh, we can go through like 2,000 photos in like 10 minutes or something. You know, it's not I'm sorry, you know I just don't see it. I just don't see that as being reality. um Aftershoot, on the other hand, is 90 to 95% accurate, and I'm living testament to this stuff. It really is. It's really, really good. you know um Sometimes I look through the pictures that have come out of Aftershoot and I think, oh, actually, I quite like that one, but that's okay. You know, you this thing will do things like it can group similar looking images, and it's really, really good because it makes it really easy just to go in and sort of see what you've got. Customization. So manual, there is no customization, whereas the AI is learning and adapting. Internet requirement, there's neither for either of the methodologies that I've talked about today. Why is AI the future? Well, obviously, it frees photographers to focus on creative editing and client relationships. It's ideal for high volume workflows like weddings, commercial shoots, wildlife, and sports. This is not going to be for everyone. If you go out and you're not shooting, um, you're not shooting, very high rates, cull manually. Cull manually. I think the really good thing about Aftershoot is it reduces fatigue and human error, because you know what it's like when you're culling. It's quite a repetitive sort of task. So that's all I'm going to say. I'm not going to say any more. I'm just going to say, look, thank you, and have you got any questions? And I'm, like I said, I'm completely transparent. I've got a link here as I've become an affiliate. And if you click the link, you will get an extra 15% discount off Aftershoot, which I think is pretty awesome. But hey, I'm going to say no more about Aftershoot, and I'm going to switch back off, and I'm just going to see if there are any questions. So let me stop sharing for a minute.
I do.
Go on, Suri's got he's chomping at the bit. Suri,
What do you think of Imagine AI? I almost trained my photos on that, but then masochist in me said, nah, not worth it. Let me do my own culling. Because for me, I'm not on a professional assignment, therefore I don't have a deadline thing. And one of the things I noticed is that for me, by going through each of the images, I can find certain gems that otherwise I wouldn't have. Like one time I did a backyard hawk. I took about 300-400 pictures. And as I was zooming in each one of them, I found one of them had a nictitating membrane coming halfway through. That I don't think your AI would have found that to be a different one than others because this is a long zoom shot. So I was wondering, have you looked at Imagine AI and then what do you think of it?
I've got to be honest. Imagine is not one of the ones I've tried. I have tried things like narrative online, and do you know? And I'm not gonna. Oh, sorry, I almost said the wrong thing. Then I almost said I'm not gonna come over all vanilla, if you know what I mean. Um, I'm not gonna come over all. I'm just pushing one company. Um, I prefer the interface of Aftershoot, and I prefer the way that Aftershoot gives you back the files after it's culled. You know, everything about it just feels smooth and easy. And I mean, look, people are going to say, I mean, even well, I don't know. Is there a learning curve with something like Aftershoot? I mean, I suppose there's a learning curve with everything, but not really. I mean, literally, if you so desire, you can go on, you can put your photos through this, and you can just, you can let the AI do its work. What I like about it is the way um, it will tell you. So let's say I've got 1,500 images. It might come back and it will say to me, well, okay, then look, I've got 300 good ones. There's going to be a small percentage that are blurred, and then there are some, yeah, just don't rate these. And then, it's not like you've just got to take the AI's word for it. You can still go in and check the other ones. One of the best things that I think it does, in fact, I don't think I know, it groups like photos together. So for example, if I'm shooting Liz, and sometimes Liz will be in the same position, and I'll be moving around her with the camera, taking shots at different angles. Now, the position can be similar sometimes, or sometimes I might just get her to make fractional changes. It's kind of handy when the software will pick all of this stuff out together. Just before I carry on, Liz, are you able to have a look at the chat? Just while I don't know, are there any?
Yeah, I can do the chat. We've had a few questions.
Are there any questions that I should be answering? I'll let you.
Let me get back onto the chat. Yeah, we've had a few questions.
Go for it.
So, what's your opinion on photo mechanic for culling?
So, Photo Mechanic is a really, really good program. Like I said, I'm not here to knock anyone. My understanding, sorry, can someone just help me out with this? Is Photo Mechanic just for Mac? Does anyone know? I've got a feeling it's just for Macs. I might be wrong. Anyhow, my understanding is it is a really good program, but again, it's kind of manual, if I understand it correctly. So, again, there's something called, I used to use something called Fast Raw Viewer, which is another manual program. There's a small cost to Fast Raw Viewer. Why did I use Fast Raw Viewer when I was doing it manually? It allows you to look at actual RAWs rather than the JPEG files. And one of the other things that something like Fast Raw Viewer will do, it will show you the raw histogram, which, you know, many of these manual programs won't. I've got a feeling that Photo Mechanic will, but there are some that won't. And, you know, being able to read that histogram is really, really important. It's important to know, you know, have I got something here that's going to be worthwhile, or have I got something here that, you know, hey, maybe I just need to move on. Fantastic. I hope so. I hope that answers your question. I'm not an expert with Photo Mechanic, but I have heard it's pretty good.
But it is available on both Windows and Mac.
Oh, is it? Oh, there you go. There you go. Any other questions in there, Liz?
Yes, to what extent do you feel that using culling software just encourages like a trigger-happy approach to photography rather than thinking about actually producing the image?
Okay, right. Do you know what? Who said that? I'm just kidding. Unfortunately, as I said at the beginning of the presentation, photography has changed with the onset of digital. I'll tell you what, look, if I go out with my Sony A7R5, it's very, very easy to shoot a hell of a lot of in-focus photos, you know, and, you know, it's very easy to, you know, just to, you know, I don't ever machine gun. You know, I'm predominantly a portrait photographer, as a lot of you know. And generally, I'm shooting on you know, like single fire. I'm not shooting on multiple frame. I'm shooting on single frame. Sometimes, so for example, if I'm shooting Liz or another model, I will be if they're moving, if they're wearing something, for example, and they're moving, and I want to catch movement, then I'll start, you know, gunning on on like 10 frames a second or something along those lines. Again, you know, this is a really, really good question about, are these programs just for people that you know, they're just trigger happy? You know, I don't think we've got Ian with us today. That's a shame. You know, someone like Ian Nielsen, who's with the group. If you asked Ian if he's doing wildlife photography, about, you know, okay then Ian, if you know, look, catching that bird in flight, just, you know, just as its beaks touching the water or something, are you going to get that with one shot? Chances are you're not. Sports photography, you know, if you are shooting hockey or shooting football, you're shooting something that's Formula One, you're shooting something that's fast moving, you know, chances are you're going to be gunning. If you're shooting aircraft, you know, quite often, I mean, obviously, given how fast these things move, you know, you're going to, you know, the chances are you're probably going to be shooting a lot. I was going to make like an awful statement about, you know, the sort of guys that shoot trains and what have you, but you never know. There could be some train shooters on here, so I'm not going to say a word. But anything that you shoot that's fast, you know, sometimes cycling would be another one. Again, I know it comes under sport, but anything like that, the chances are you're going to go through a lot of frames. If you are going out, if you're going out and you're doing portraits, if you're going out and you're shooting macro, if you're shooting still lifes, if you're doing product photography, you're not going to be going through thousands and thousands of frames, in my experience. Do you know, as much as I love my Sony A7R5, I've got a camera. I know I've shown it to some of you before. It's a Sigma. Oh my God, and the name is completely escaping me. It's an odd looking thing. It weighs a ton. You know, Oh my God, it is as slow as anything. It's got no video functionality. It is, you can't get ready for this. You can't use it over 200 ISO because the grain from the camera becomes ridiculous. It's horrible. So you might ask, why the hell? Oh, hang on. I was going to grab. Oh, I won't grab it, honestly. Why do I use the Sigma? Well, firstly, I use it because of its sensor, because it's got a very, very unique Fovean sensor in the Sigma, which is just awesome. It doesn't work. There are only sort of 3 sensor manufacturers out there, and it doesn't work like the other 2. Oh, I'm not even going to go there with this. I've got no clue. I'm going to lose myself in it. It just produces amazing pictures. Do you know what I love about using the Sigma? It's simply that it slows me down, because when I use it, it feels more like I'm using an old film camera. Because like every time I take a shot with it, this isn't something that's got 10 frames a second. It's probably got about 4. Do you know what I mean? It's not very, whatever it is. It might be 5, but it's not very fast, whatever it is. And it's kind of it's kind of slow, but I love it because it forces you to really think about what you're doing when you're taking these shots. I hope that answers your question. Are there any other questions there, Liz, before we move on?
That's Neil.
Oh, sorry. Neil, did you say?
I think that Sari was just speaking, but Neil's been putting the questions in the chat.
Oh, okay. Let's have a look. Do you use... Oh, okay. Let's just have a quick look here. Photo mechanic. Right. Okay. Oh, Neil hasn't got any audio. Oh, okay. Right. Let me just make sure that I'm not missing anything here. Sorry, guys. Bear with me a minute. Okay. Right. Fine. Okay. So Ben's asked an interesting question here. Do you... And we'll come back to you, sorry. So sorry, sir. Do you use tags to identify photos of interest and group photos to make ones you want to post-process? Absolutely, I do. Yes, absolutely, I do. If I think, and this is just the way that I cull, but even after I've used something like Aftershoot just to do the bulk of the culling, I will then go through and I'll have a look at the shots that it feels, are the very best ones and what have you. And then I'll just I will have a very quick skim through all of them, and I will tag. I mean, what I do, I keep it simple. I don't like this idea of using, like, literally what I'm going to have is 5 stars means I'm going to process it. I might have 4 stars. That looks interesting, but I'm not going to process it right now. And that's it. It's nothing. It really is as simple as that. And sorry, I want to be clear. It doesn't mean to say that I'm just going to delete all of the rest of those photos. That would be lunacy. I just wouldn't do it. But I'm going to just be selective and get the ones that I want, then get them into whatever program that I'm going to use to work on them. So yes, I do. I absolutely do tag them. And also, I think I haven't got time to talk about this now, but the way that you organize your folders, or the way that you organize your folder structure, I find, well, I don't know, I've got a system that works for me. I literally I file photos by the actual shoot and the date, and by the camera. I've got things on my camera. I've set up metadata on my camera so that I know which camera I'm using and when I've used it. And we'll come back to this because I think this is like a topic. This is like a topic in itself. Suri, sorry about that, matey. Sorry.
Oh, no, I was just going to make a comment about the Fovean sensor. I did work on that with the inventor in my company before they sold it to Sigma. And to me, Foveon is to Betamax what Bayer sensors are to VHS.
Yes, that's right.
Just
Yeah,
want to say that.
I mean, they're really sophisticated. They're really, really good sensors. And oh, I'm so kicking myself right now. I cannot, for the life of me, remember the name of the Sigma camera that I've got. So I'll tell you what, just very quickly. I was at a photographic show with my daughter. We were at the Sigma stand, and they had these weird looking, like scientific looking cameras. They had ridiculously like long bodies with like a lens on one end, and then like I'm not going to say I'm exaggerating if I say that they're a foot long, but they're really, really long. And they were really slim. And I was like, oh my God, what's this? Some sort of photographic camera. And
Yeah, in fact, one of the things Sigma lost on was stating the truth. When they say it's a 2 megapixels,
yeah,
it's literally 2 megapixels because they're stacked vertically.
yeah, that's
Whereas if you have your Sony R5, 61 megapixels is actually 20 megapixels because each one of the RGBs take 1 pixel.
yeah,
They
that's
don't
right.
state that.
That's
So
right.
it's the biggest scandalous thing that camera
Yep.
industry has been perpetuating
No,
for a
that's
long
dead
time.
right. No, you're dead right. So it was just really interesting because I looked at, I was laughing at this camera, and the guy from Sigma saw me laughing. And he said to me, what's funny? And I said, oh, we were just laughing at your sort of scientific looking cameras. And the guy went and got a print, and he had this like print of a landscape, and it was enormous. I mean, it's like poster size. And I was looking at it, and I said, well, what did you take that? Would you take that on one of those like Fuji medium format sort of cameras they've got out there? And he said, no, we took it on that camera that you're laughing at. And I must admit, I hired one to start off with, and I took it away to Dorset, and the results are just amazing. So, look, this camera is sometimes it can be a little bit limited use. I can't use it for everything. It's not fast enough. If I want to go out and shoot landscapes, or if I'm going to be shooting still lifes, or I'm going to be shooting um maybe portraits, I don't know, nothing that's going to be particularly vigorous action, yeah, it's brilliant, it's absolutely great. The only thing is it is so slow that it's kind of painful. It can, and so I don't know, it's not fair. Do you know, it's really, really important to stop sometimes as we're taking all of these photos, look at what you've got in front of you and ask yourself, um, does this make sense? Does this make sense to me? What I'm seeing, does it make sense? Or am I, um, ah, am I missing something here? You know, I shall park it there. Um, at this point, I think we need to move over to the next part of our presentation. I've got my time.
Did you get Ben's message?
Sorry. Oh, thank you. Oh, yes, I did. I spoke to, yeah, I've mentioned Ben's message.
All right, cool.
Fantastic. So I'm going to hand over now, to our next speaker this evening. So the very nice Jim Karofsky. He's going to be talking to us about light painting. And frankly, I cannot wait. Do you know what I love about the Luminosity League and the people here? We have got such a nice crowd of people. Everybody gets along. We go off, we do breakout rooms, we talk about all sorts of photography, we do all sorts of things. Tonight it is a little bit talking because normally we're on screen editing, you know. But the people here are serious quality. People like Jim. I mean, I've learned so much from Jim since he has been along to our group that, hey, I'm absolutely in awe of this guy. So I'm not going to give him any more of an introduction. He's going to have to walk out of the room at some point tonight, and so I shall hand over to Jim. Jim, over to you, sir.
Oh, excellent. That's probably way too much of an introduction, to be honest, but no, I appreciate that. and I know that everybody here really varies in their degree of editing skills and what they do and what they don't do. So forgive me if I kind of go back to the beginning and talk about a few things, because this originally was made for an organization of photographers, but again, they varied quite a bit, and some of them didn't know as much about things. And so we started at the beginning, and hopefully I'll even bring up something we all know, and hopefully we'll get you to think maybe a little differently about how we view our photos. So why don't we start with that? I'm going to see if I can get this to take over the screen here. And let's see if it will let me do this. Okay, yeah, I think you got the right stuff here. And again, I just want to let everybody know again, some of this will be review, but I want you to see it in a different way. And I came from a science background, so for me, this is always, I need to understand things and see how they come together and know how they work. Otherwise, for me, this is very hard to explain to somebody else. So the first thing I did, I know these pictures do not look like any award winners, and they are not. But what I wanted to start out with, and we're going to come back to this idea several times. I went to a high school that was going to do a presentation or a play. And I actually wanted to do this with a professional group because obviously professionals are much better at lighting their stages than a high school would be. But there's a reason I did this. The reason that I wanted to sort of do this was, by the way, my mouse is not working here, so it's not letting me do anything right now. So I can't see my mouse and I can't make anything work. All right, well, that's okay. We're just going to move on. But what I wanted to show you was this is what we're going to be talking about tonight. Depending on how you light something, you direct people's attention to that spot. So in this case, you're seeing 4 different patterns of light that were put up on the stage. It's the same stage. Nothing has changed. The camera never moved, but the lighting is different. And so tonight we're going to try to use this idea that we can direct people's vision to where we want it to go by relighting our photos. All right. So the first thing I wanted to mention, again, if you're not editing your photos, you're probably not really getting the impact from your photos. And I said you're 95% of the time. It's probably even higher than that. Because really, our photos really do need a little work, and we're going to talk about that. But every now and then, yes, you get that perfect photo. The lighting is great. The sky is perfect. Whatever it is you're doing, it's just perfect. Leave it alone. I get it. No reason to mess with it. But here's the part that's most important. If you're editing your photos globally, in other words, you only edit the overall photo, you're really missing out the power that we have in our software tools today and focusing people's attention to where we want it to go. So then the question is, well, why do we need to edit our photos? And this is a little bit of a review, but I need to add some things that maybe you haven't thought about. Our cameras simply don't see like we see. It's just not the way it works. I mean, I know we're trying to make our cameras see the way we see, but it's just not the way it is. And I'll give you some examples of that. First off, when you take a picture, you all know we have to tell the camera how much light to let in. So we adjust our shutter speeds, we do our f-stops, we do our ISOs, and we then make this decision of how much light comes in. But here's the problem. If I have a really bright scene with a bright sky and some woods below it, the camera says, would you like me to get the adjustment for the bright sky or for the woods? Well, that's not the way our eyes work. Our eyes can see both at the same time very, very well. So if we rely on our camera to give the perfect photo, it can't do what our eyes do. So already we have a device which is not capable of showing what we see there as we're actually looking out and seeing what we're seeing. Second thing is your camera says, I need to set up what I call the white balance, right? I mean, it has to know what is true white. Well, again, what's different with your eyes? Your eyes can see somebody sitting in a room on one side under an incandescent light and on the other side of the room a fluorescent light. And your eyes see those people looking pretty normal. Your camera says, which one would you like me to pick? And you have to pick one. So you get either the person under the incandescent light correctly or the fluorescent light correctly, but you don't get both. It's just not the way it works. So we, again, are seeing things differently than our cameras will give us back a representation. The other thing is when we view photos in real life, we overlook things all the time. And I don't know the mechanisms of the brain, to be honest with you, but I think it's because we see in 3 dimensions, we know what to focus on, we know what to see, and we ignore things. And what I've noticed when I go to meetings and we put up a photo for people to look at, they look at the photo and they'll say, well, I see a little bright spot to the right of that, and that's distracting me. But you know, if you were standing there looking at that thing, you probably would never have said that. And if you watch video on television, many times those camera people are really quite good. The ones that do, network and commercial television, they're quite good. But there are times even they screw up, and there are bright objects or there are things in the background that are distracting. But because it's got movement and all these other things, we kind of overlook those things that are in the background. We just don't really see them. Now, if you're looking for them, yes, you will see them, but you don't always. And I've got one more here, and it says, in a scene, we kind of usually know what's important. Scott Kelby did an interesting representation of this. He took a picture of a church at the end of a street that was like a T. So he's standing on the street that's looking down to the T end of that street. And he takes a picture of the church and he shows it to people who live there. And he asks them questions like, I've done something to this photo of this church that you see down at the end of the street. What did I do? And people are looking at the photo and they're going, well, I think maybe you changed the color of the door, or maybe you removed a window, or maybe you did this, or maybe the steeple's different. They came up with all these different things. And when he showed them what he did, they were all surprised. He removed the wires, the electrical wires, which run in front of that church. Because when you and I stand there, our brains don't focus on those wires. You take that same photo, put it out for people to look at, and they'll say, those wires are really distracting. It's just the way our brains process things. It's just not the same. So it's okay to make changes to your photos. It's okay to do some of these things that maybe in the past when I first got started, I was always nervous about making too many decisions. But I think it's a good idea. I just want to make up by the way, any questions with that so far? Does that make sense to everybody? That we are definitely looking at, our cameras are just different. I wanted to mention something about JPEGs versus RAW and cell phones. First off, when you look at the back of your camera or you look through the viewfinder, especially in mirrorless, you are not seeing a raw picture. Even if you take pictures in RAW, you're seeing a JPEG. And your camera is incredibly sophisticated at basically adjusting your photos as if you were in an editing program. So if you were to take your JPEGs out and look at them and look at your RAW photos, you go, my RAW photos look terrible. How come my RAW photos are so crummy and the JPEGs are so beautiful? Well, the camera did a ton of work for you. So when you see the JPEGs, keep in mind they've already been edited. They've already adjusted the highlights. They've come up and fixed the shadows. They've tried some clarity. They've done color balances. They've done all kinds of stuff in the background that you probably didn't even know they were all doing. Now, again, some of you know this well because you get what's going on in your camera. And RAW, on the other hand, is basically just that. It's raw data that was captured that's not been processed much in any way, although I can't say it's not processed at all because remember, raw data has to be converted in a program for you to see. And there is sometimes some things going on in the background. And now you might say, well, if JPEGs are so great, why don't I just keep my JPEGs? Well, again, the problem is once a JPEG has baked in these changes, if something is really, really bright, you can never get that data back. All you can do is make it darker and it'll look gray and muddy. And if something is really, really dark, it's going to be very hard to bring it back. It's going to look all grainy and not with a lot of detail. On the other hand, RAW has all that data, but you have to adjust it. So which one's better? I think for most of us, we use RAWs knowing that they're not that great, but we're going to fix them. All right. So again, keep in mind, that's another reason why you really need to go and fix your photos. And I put down and cell phones, and the only reason I did that is cell phones are actually getting smarter and smarter at being able to capture things even better than our cameras do. The only problem with cell phones, of course, their lenses aren't as good. They can fake depth of field, but it's not the same as our fancy cameras. So again, which is the best? Well, depends on where you're at. JPEGs aren't bad. RAWs are probably better for most of us. Cell phones aren't bad in some adjustability. But anyway, again, kind of that reason why we really need to adjust stuff in general, just because cameras aren't quite like our eyes. I wanted to just show you this because I got a really simple example from a lady sent this to me from her. She took this off her iPhone of some flowers in her backyard. And literally this is like 4,000 pixels big, not megapixels, 4,000 pixels. So we're talking like tiny, tiny, tiny. And I know that if you were standing there with her, actually looking at the flowers, chances are you would look at those flowers and you would ignore that ugly wall behind it. I get that because that wall doesn't really go with the flowers, doesn't make a lot of sense. So she asked me if there's anything you can do, and I said, well, there's not a lot really we can do. First off, again, this was a JPEG, not a lot of adjustability. So I went in and I just changed the color of the back wall a little bit. And now it blends in a little better than it did before. And I have a feeling more people would object to the one on the left because the wall is just wrong. And if you just change the coloring a little bit, it starts to blend with the flowers. I did have trouble over on the top of the flowers there because if you notice, I tried to darken the leaves. Being a JPEG, this is what I was talking about. When you bring down the brightness, many times you get a gray look because when you take white down, it becomes gray, and if you take it down more, it becomes black. And you really can't do much with colors because everything starts to just fall apart. And again, being a small JPEG didn't really work. But I just wanted to show you that just to give you an idea of something really minor can make a difference. So the question is, do other professionals believe in like doing this kind of editing? I don't know if many of you know a woman named Christina Shirk, I'm sorry. She actually does a tremendous amount of head retouching. As I understand it, she even used to work in government for a congressman or senator, used to do thousands of photos a week to get these out. And she said she knew somebody who had a class with Ansel Adams. Most of you know Ansel Adams. I mean, he's a name we all kind of kick around as black and white photography. And Ansel said to the class, 50% of your professional photographer skills really due to how they use their cameras. The other 50% is because they actually know their skills in the darkroom. That was a crazy revolution for me to know that, yes, it's really good to know how to get your camera stuff right. But the idea that if you aren't using a darkroom, something is, or in our case now, we've gone to Lightroom or some other editing programs, but you really need to know those to get your pictures to come out well. And I just put a few other names here that you might know. Again, Scott Kelby's in there. Yes, he's in there. They just did some things on pictures for airplanes, and they were showing how they edited those. They've done landscapes. They do all kinds of things all the time. Frans Lansing is known for his stuff with National Geographic.
Yeah.
And some of you know Matt Kloskowski and a few others.
Yeah.
So, by the way, sir, you are live on the air. There you go. Thanks, Eric. So anyway, I just wanted to show you that I also have Vanelli down there because of those of us that watch him on Wednesdays, you've seen him readjust his stuff regularly. Some of you also know Jim Nix. And I asked Jim Nix if he's one of those that's actually very, very helpful. And he will send you, well, he sent me at least, and he does this usually live on his website, a photo that he actually took, and then he shows you his photo that he made from that. All right. So if you look at it, here's the interesting part. He shot this photo the way many of us do today, and that is you shoot for the brightness of the sky because the cameras have more than enough data to bring back the stuff that's too dark. So on the left, you'll see it's pretty dark. On the right, he brought up the pebbles and all of the rocks in the foreground and the mountains. He also changed the coloring of the sky. And he put all those things together for us to see how this was done. And again, I was really grateful to him because most professional photographers hate to show you the as photographed photos. They don't want to show you that. So you never see, here's another one. Off on the left, you can see shot for the sky. Off on the right, did his editing. And that's kind of what we're talking about, relighting things so that your photos look like the pros. And I don't think most of us understand how much work they do. I'll just mention one thing, and we'll come back to some of this. But Scott Kelby, just the other day, said he was sitting with a professional landscape photographer many years ago. And he had mentioned to him how he loved his work. And he said, boy, you know, some of the skies in your pictures are just awesome. And the guy said, well, yeah, I change out a lot of my skies. And Scott said that was the first time he understood that a lot of landscape photographers change the skies. And he had never known that. You know, he kind of thought, well, you kind of get what you're going to get. So let me just say right off the top, should you get it right in camera? Yes, you should. However, when we travel or we go places, sometimes you're at a scene like this, you're only there for one day. So whatever the clouds are that day, you're going to get. And you have to leave. And so sometimes you may have to go in and sort of, if you want this to become a great photo, you may have to make some changes that it really wasn't there that day, but you didn't have a choice. Or sometimes I know I'm out taking pictures in bright sunlight at noon because that's when I'm there. Or you're with a family and a vacation and the kids say, we're not going to sit here until 9 o'clock to get the perfect hour of sunset. They want to go. So sometimes you're taking pictures that you just don't have a choice. So again, that's what this is all about. And we're going to talk a little bit about some of this, but brightness and sharpness and color and making all of these different changes, and we can make our pictures look much, much better. So let's do some editing. Okay, so let me get rid of this first. And let's see, I think we got this all working here. This is not my photo. I wish it were, but it's not my photo. I wanted to show this to you because, again, sometimes we see things and we just don't understand how much work goes into these photos. So this was a photo done of James Dean in the 50s, again, black and white photography. And you wonder first, what did the original look like? That was the original. But this was one, that's what they marked up that they were going to do to correct that photo before they published it. So if you wonder, like, were pros even in the 50s screwing around with their photos? Oh, yes, they were. And they were doing a lot of changes that we had no idea if we weren't doing a lot of this work ourselves. And again, if you weren't in the darkroom, I'm sure, again, I didn't do a lot of darkroom stuff. I used to watch people do darkroom stuff, but I wasn't great at it, and I realized it was a lot more work than I wanted to do. But I think a lot of this has to do with where they were going to place masks over the different parts of the picture in order to change the brightnesses so that they could get this final photo that they get here to make it look great.
Jim,
Yeah.
So when I started, I used to have a dark room of my own. And do you know what? When I look at these pictures that are kind of marked up, you were saying about putting masks over, and do you know what? It used to be insane. It used to be insane. I just remember being stuck in like a small room with like a red light on,
Hmm.
not the wrong sort of red light, is it? But a red light on, and I'd have the everything I say about this is going to sound sort of wrong, but I'd be standing there in front of the enlarger, and I'd have like um old metal coat hangers that so I'd cut a coat hanger up, and I just had like a fairly sturdy strip of metal wire, and I'd have a bit of cardboard stuck on that strip. So when you put the negatives into your enlarger and they get projected down onto the paper, they still look like negatives. So aside from the fact that, like the things that you're dodging and, you're burning, because I mean, this is where dodging and burning come from. So, for example, if you wanted to dodge something, you wanted to make it lighter, what you're doing is in effect, you're holding like um, oh my God, you're literally like holding a pencil with like something on the end of it, just over the part of the photo that you want to dodge, and you don't know what effect you're having. And also, if you wanted to burn something, I'd be making all of these like strange sort of patterns with my hand, although they would be horizontal like this, just burning like the parts of the image which are actually a negative as I'm seeing them on the paper. So sorry, I thought I'd just drop that in.
No,
If,
I
if
think
only
that's
it was
great
the
to know.
case that it was like you got a mask and you went, oh, I'll just put it on top. It didn't work like that.
And it's funny after I saw this, and I actually just pulled this up quickly as we were or you were talking earlier, because I remember seeing this when you were talking about, working in the dark rooms and stuff. And I thought, well, I ought to pull one of these up. But there's a whole series of these available for what was published in newspapers years ago and how much work was done. And there are photos that if we were to look at, you would go, boy, I remember kind of seeing that maybe years and years ago, or that picture comes up periodically. And then when you see what they had to do to make it right, it's crazy. And so I guess all I'm trying to say is this is that idea of we need to relight our stuff. They've been relighting photos forever because everybody knows that cameras don't see things quite like we do. And faces can get dark when we don't want them to look dark, and sometimes buildings are too bright. And you can see here they're making those adjustments. So, but thank you. Yeah, I completely agree. In fact, because I know we're kind of late here, I don't want to spend too much time on actually showing you how to make photos great. But I was at a zoo and I got this picture. Now you're saying, well, that's not a bad picture. Why would you fix it? Well, that's actually not the picture I got. That's the picture I got. And it's a little underexposed. It's not perfect. There's bird poop under his head. There's crap on the rocks. There's all kinds of things that people will see here. And if you were standing with me with the bear there at the zoo, you would have seen them, but you wouldn't have concentrated on them. When you put this into a photo, people look at all the little stuff that's in here and they start going, well, that really shouldn't be there. Well, you're right, it shouldn't be. But again, when you're standing there, you really don't see things the same way. And I thought, well, maybe we can actually fix one of these photos and give you an idea of how this is done. And again, you saw how that was marked up on the last picture that I showed you. We're going to do sort of the same things, and we're going to try to readjust things in such a way that we can make this picture look better. So I'm choosing to use Lightroom, but it doesn't really matter what system you use. They all have similar tools. The only reason that I'm using this one, first off, I use it as my way of organizing photos. But secondly, I kind of like the way it works and the way it works with masks. And it's got some features in it that I think are really nice. but I don't want that to limit anybody into saying, well, that means I can't use On One, I can't use Neo, I can't use DX. So, no, they all have a way of doing what you're about to see, but it just depends on your system as to how you do it. But basically, they all kind of come up with the same thing. And the first thing I would do is I would build a radial mask, one like this, and these are adjustable. And again, depending on your system, you can kind of put this over the bear. And I want you to see this bear, and I want you to see him as the centerpiece of this whole puzzle. So that radial is now over him, and you can see there's two circles, and I'll just mention that one is where whatever I apply will be full strength in here, and it will work its way to no strength to the second line. And so what I'm going to do with this is, first off, I want to give him a little bit of a yellowish color because that's actually what he had. I didn't really get a great white balance here because my camera just did what it did. But I also want to make sure that he's a little brighter. And he's gonna wind up being a little overly bright, and you'll see that right here in his hair out in the area of the front of his head. We're gonna fix all of that. All right. So the first thing I did is I'm just putting something on him to make him brighter. All right. Next, I realized his arm didn't really get some of this, and I could have painted it in with that last mask that I put on, and I could have done it there. I just want to set this in separately because I want to make sure we get his arm in pretty good shape. So I'm going to pick something called Object, and the nice thing about Object is I can just paint it, and it finds it, and it goes, oh, there's his arm, and I go, great. And then I can kind of do the same thing. I'll bring it up. Remember, I made him a little more yellow like he actually is, and we're going to take care of that. But now that I've over-adjusted his hair in front, I need to go back and fix that. And the beautiful part of when you're working in any of these editors, most of them are what we call non-destructive. In other words, they're looking at the data and they're showing me the changes, but they don't change the actual picture itself. So in this case, I look at this guy and I go, well, you're a little bright here, so I'm going to take another mask and I'm going to use a brush this time, and I'm just going to say, well, let's kind of pick this area. And I'm going to bring down the brightness there a little bit so that that's no longer a problem. But I also look at him and I go, well, his nose isn't really great. Okay, well, then let's go fix his nose. And again, I'll just pick Object because I'm lazy right now, and it'll find his nose. I then can bring up his nose. I also notice his eyes aren't great. So I'm going to just take a brush, and I'm going to hopefully be able to make this with a brush here. Let's see if we can. Now, again, if I were doing this for like, I would zoom in, I would try to make sure I get this just perfect. A few little tricks for you. Many times whenever you try to brighten something, you screw up the blacks or the whites. So in other words, I move this up to be brighter. So what'll happen is the blacks won't be as black, but we know that his eyes should be black. So let's see, maybe, I don't know if I can get this in here. I can bring back those blacks by just bringing those back a little, and we'll see if we can bring his eyes up a little. All right, so I was able now to sort of work those eyes a little bit, and we've got those sort of back. I also love his nails, and I would like to be sure that I get those nails in there. So again, I'm lazy, so I like this one called Objects. It usually finds whatever the object is, which is really nice. And then I can kind of brighten those up. And even if I go back and I say, well, maybe this picture still should be a little brighter, I can still brighten it up a little bit, the whole picture. But again, I might have to come back and readjust this part in his hair because we do know that that's still a little bright. Now, here's the part about if you're going to adjust even a lot of landscapes and a lot of other things, most photographers, again, these are the pros that do this over and over and over, will come to a picture like this one and they will get what's called a linear gradient. In other words, I'll make this big here so we can see it. This is a gradient that works on a line. And in general, many of them will take that linear gradient and apply it to the bottom of the photo and apply something similar to the top of the photo. Now, if you have a sky, sometimes you don't need the linear gradient. You can just select the sky and make your changes. But I'm just going to kind of move this down here a little bit because this part over here is a little distracting. I'm going to turn this down a little bit, and I might even tip this a little and bring it down because really I'm most worried about that rock. And I also notice up here, this is a little bright. And again, we're doing this quickly, but again, I just want you to see how this would be done. I'm going to take one of those linear gradients again, put it in up there. We'll bring this down a little bit so that we're able to sort of correct that. And now I've made those multiple adjustments. I didn't adjust the overall picture very much. I did do some. But the point is, I need you to look at the bear. I want you to ignore other things. Now, I will notice one thing here that I don't like. See this right here? This is a little bright, but that's coming from this mask that I have. And what I need to do is get that out of there. And again, the part of the reason I like these masks better than, let's say, some of the other programs, once you've selected or put in a mask, many times you can't readjust that mask. Well, I don't like that because there's times you look and you go, boy, I really should subtract out some of this right here. And I can do that in this program because I can just say subtract with a brush. And I'm just going to come in here and just kind of take this out. Again, I'm not going to be real fussy right now or what we're doing. But I was able to take that out pretty well so that now nobody's going to be too upset with what I've done. And by the way, all these little dots you're just seeing here, it's showing you all of the different adjustment areas that I have made. I can turn those on and off where they show up or don't show up. But if my cursor is somewhere over the photo, it shows all of these different areas that I've adjusted. And I could go back in and work them over. And sort of the last things I'll just show you. Last night I tried doing this, and for some reason they turned off these features. They must have been updating their software last night at Adobe. But this is one of those where it has some AI that you can use. And I'm just going to remove that spot because I don't like it. And I'm too lazy to actually use cloning. I'll just use a tool that says, okay, it's gone. How do you like that? If I don't like that, I've got 3 choices. Here's another choice. Oh, I like that one even better. And I'll do this here. I don't like this little piece of lettuce or whatever you had there. I don't know. Something here I don't really like. And again, I'm doing this because I know people will look at those little spots and they're going to say, well, they're really ugly. Can't you get rid of them? Okay, let's try and get rid of them. And then I have one more spot up on the top right, and I don't remember where this came from. But let's see if we can get rid of that. And again, I'm using AI tools. Fine. All of that's been adjusted. Well, I see one more little bird poop here. I'm sure somebody would be telling me there's something wrong with that. So I just wanted to show everybody this is what we're talking about. It's you going into your pictures, individually adjusting areas to get the picture the way you need it to be. All right, does that make sense to everybody? Any questions on what we've done so far? Because I'll just show you a few more, and then we can kind of move on to other things. Does that make sense? By the way, I can't see hands because I had to get rid of a screen here because I only have a single screen.
But
no
if anybody, no hands right now, Jim. But
sorry, I accidentally messaged Simon. I just wanted to say that's amazing. I love the before and afters, and I wish that more photographers would actually post this kind of content because so often I think in photography, like when people get started, they see like these final images and they're like, how on earth did you get that? But they don't realize how much editing is going into it and what the before looked like. So I think it's just really important to post those before and afters and be open about it. But I love it. It looks good before, but it looks even better after.
Oh, we'll go back. I'll show you the befores again. We can do that. But I also notice his claws to me just look a little yellow. And usually claws are a little more white. I'm just going to take out the saturation of the color. And again, that'll get you to look down at those nails because generally bears don't let their nails hang out like that. And I just think it's really interesting for you to be able to look over at those nails and go, yeah, those are pretty impressive. I mean, that's quite a
Did you use a
handful of.
photo as a reference? Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead. No, go ahead.
Did you use a photo as a reference when you were doing the coloring, or did you just kind of like just do what you thought looked good?
Oh shoot! Now I just did a badness there.
Well, there we go.
Okay, there we go. Let me see if I can make this. That's the original. That's the changed photo. And again, I know I didn't do this perfectly, but I just wanted to show, at least while we're doing this today, I wanted to show some differences of why you go through, not just taking the overall picture, which again, I mean, I could have gone, I do have a picture. Well, for some reason, this little bar just came in here. All right. If I took the overall picture and just tried to adjust it, I will never be able to get what I had before. And it doesn't matter what I try to do to this. It isn't really going to matter. Because I still have way too much brightness around the outside of the object. And one of the tricks I have found that works really well is to take a radial filter to whatever your object is. Now, I'll do it here just to show you how this works. But if you take a radial filter and then you reverse it, there's usually a way to invert what you have. And then I can bring down the brightness around it first. And now I've already told you where to look. This is back way when we started. I said, remember that auditorium? And we had lights that tell you where to look. I've told you now where to look. I said, look at the bear. Don't look at the stuff around the bear. And that's really what we're trying to do when we go in to work on our photos. All right, I hope that makes sense to everybody.
I mean,
and again, I know everybody's at a different point along the way. So some of you do this all the time and you're going, well, that's stupid. I've done this forever. But there's a lot of people who are nervous about making those pictures within the picture, but that's what the pros are doing.
And that's what it's all about, really, isn't it, Jim? You know,
Yeah.
I mean, amazing, just amazing, an amazing transformation. And it just, you can't always get these pictures straight out of camera. I mean, you know, there's the odd serendipitous moment, but wow, wowzer.
I'm going to see if I can't reset one. Oh, there we go. I wanted to show you this because this is a picture that I was at a church that's in our area, and it had this heavy door with this big carving on the door. And it's a nice picture, but that's not what we're interested in. What I'm interested in is showing you this, and what I had to do was relight the cross, the face, to get you to look at those things which are most important in this particular picture. So that's kind of what I did here. I just wanted you to see that because it's sort of important to understand that, yeah, it's different. This is just flat. It doesn't really help you see what's going on. And my job is to tell you this is the important stuff. I think I've shown this one to Simon already. We were talking about our cameras are amazing, but sometimes they do stupid things. And I was out taking pictures for a group that needed this Revolutionary War kind of photo that was taking place. And I think, well, I'll take that back. This is World War I. And one of the things, we just talked a tiny bit about this today, but sensors are kind of interesting things in that they have green receptors, red receptors, and blue receptors, but every camera has 2 green receptors for every 1 blue or 1 red. Now, I shouldn't say every because I can't guarantee it's true of every camera, but I'm pretty sure that that's very, very typical. And so when I was taking this picture, the first thing you need to know was the camera did its job trying to figure out what should be the brightest. These people in the back were all in sunlight. So the camera, of course, looks at that and goes, well, then I ought to make this 18% gray. Well, if you look over at the histogram, the greens are pretty far out there. The camera thought this was doing its job, making that bright. These people in the foreground are sitting under a tree, and you can tell by the dark foreground in front of them because that tree is showing its shadow there. Well, all I wanted to show you was with a little bit of changing. Well, there's more a little bit, but first off, the green was way too green because that wasn't quite what I was seeing there. And the brightnesses are all screwed up. That's the same photo after I've cleaned it up. Now, I know a lot of people would throw away those first photos because they would say, well, that's really crummy. And I get that. Okay, I do get it because sometimes when we see our photos, if we don't know that we can adjust things individually, we throw them away. Like these people in front had a lot more work done to them than the people in the back. And I don't know if I still have, I can't show you what I did to it on this one, unfortunately. When I moved it here, the adjustments went away. But anyway, these guys had to be brightened up substantially because their skin and all of the other things was very difficult to see. Again, that's the way it really looks to the camera. Did I see it that way standing there? No, because my eyes know how to look at very, very shadowy things and very, very bright things. And we look at it and we go, yeah, it looks normal, but it's not normal to a camera. I also did, when I was doing these, I also did a few other things. People always said to me, well, you just had good cameras, and that's why. This is, I think, about a 10-year-old photo done on a very, very inexpensive camera. And I did do some work on it and did a little bit of dodging and burning and some other things to bring out what was in this photo. And so it just gives you an idea that there's a lot of stuff we can do if you individually go into the scene, not just in general, but actually go in there and work on the scene. You can do amazing things. I'll just show you a few other things of how, if we decide to be creative, and I know with Simon, we do stuff now with blending layers of textures and different kinds of texture layers of actual, not just colors, but actually gritty looks and so on. And I was in a club where they sent us photos and they said, see what you can do to fix a photo. And this was a guy who took this photo when he was 7 hours away from home. So he's got this photo, but it's not great. And why is it not great? Because again, when our eyes see this, we see this big lighting box and we go, well, that's like ruining the whole photo. Yes, it is. This was done before AI and before anything could be done automatically, but my job was to clean it up and I went to that. So the idea that we can now clean up our photos and do amazing things. And by the way, the sky was changed. Why did I change the sky? Because that sky to me didn't really look all that great. But a simple sky change and in getting rid of those boxes and those little chains that were running out in front made all the difference in the world. And again, I'll show you some others where I did some changes. Again, the same guy took this picture. He actually gave us it's a panorama. I just shortened it up a little bit at first. And then I went in and I sort of readjusted the colors because, again, this being a raw photo, I could get rid of the burning that he had here in some of these different buildings. But then the same problem. This is not a great shot, but he's 7 hours away from home. He's there for one morning. This is when he's there, and he's leaving. So can you do anything if you wanted to? Well, I changed the sky. Not bad. Already a different look. Changing the sky so it's sort of a maybe early evening or something's changing. And then if you want to go crazy, and I don't know if I'd go this far, but changing it into, let's say, that twilight hour where the sky is still a little bright, the lighthouse is now on, which of course it was not. And there's even some red lighting here, which might show up from that little lighthouse up above. Now, again, these aren't perfect pictures because, again, these aren't mine, and I'm not trying to do a lot, but I just wanted to let you know that there's so much we can do now with our photos. So if you have something that you really kind of like and you wish it were just a little different, we can make our stuff a little different. We just can. And I just wanted to show you one other one. And Simon, you might know this one. This is in London, and they have that. I don't remember the name of that castle that's there, that little compound that's
Oh,
in
well, that
London.
little compound called Windsor Castle, or not Windsor, Tower of London.
Yes, yes.
Oh,
And I was in
that
there,
little castle.
and again, you're only in there like when you're in there. It's you go there that day, and you're going to go away, and that's it, right? So I had this picture, and I thought, well, it's nice, but it really isn't showing me anything too special. So I changed it to that.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I love it.
Now that little change really made a difference. Now, was there sun coming from that window? Yes. Did it have that beautiful little streak coming down? No. But it does make that picture really stand out a lot more. And so I just wanted to show you that one because I think sometimes we blow off a picture and we'll go, well, I'm not going to show this to everybody, or I'm not going to put this one into a book of what I saw at the castle because it wasn't that great. That's true. Now remember, I shot this maybe 7, 8 years ago. I wasn't great with my camera. I was learning a lot of stuff at the time, but you still can turn some of these photos into something a little more interesting. And this is even older. This is 10 years ago. And again, I just wanted to show you a camera has to decide what to take pictures and how much brightness to use. But here's the interesting part. This sky is what the camera thought it should adjust for. And you can see it in the histogram. Right over here on the right, it did not overexpose the sky, but it's really bright. It's almost 100%. But what that meant to me was, since this was a raw photo, all of this stuff that's in here, all of the clouds, which you really can't see very well now because the camera actually turned up the brightness for that, but actually turned down the brightness for this bottom part because, again, it had to make a single decision. And again, this is not a great camera. This was a Sony 6000, which is about an 8-year-old or 12-year-old camera now. And that's what this camera did. So the question is, what can you do with it? Now, I played around with it just the other day. That's what I got out of it. So the idea is that data there? Yes, the data is there. Were those clouds really there? Yeah, you can see what I'm doing here. I mean, all of these different things I've done, I just brought back what was already in that photo. I didn't try to make things in that photo. I didn't change the sky. But if you are good with your camera and like have it adjust for the bright skies, you can bring back clouds. You can then go back to the darker parts, which would be all of these parts down here at the bottom, bring them up, bring their colors back to life. All of that is possible. And there's even some little these linear kinds of things, darkening parts where I don't want you to look as much there. I want you to get your eyes out of there and kind of look into here. And I'm doing that with light. Okay, I'm just drawing you over there. Now, do I want you to look around the rest of it? Yeah. So, I mean, I'm fine with you looking around here and like, what's this crap over here? And what's all this other stuff? I get it, but it's just to show you that it's okay for you to see other things. And here's another one, which turned into this. And by the way, I will say I did do one trick, and I did this because I didn't know Phil would be here today. And when I was readjusting this about 7 years ago, I wasn't careful enough to not let these leaves get little lines around them where the brightnesses behind them were different than what this was shot at. You get like little, what does Phil call that? when you get those lines around
Oh,
things.
it's like haloing, is it?
Yeah, something like that. And I realized that if if I left that in there, I know Phil would have said, I can tell what you did because I see that halo. And I thought, well, I can't let him do that. So I just took them out using now new AI techniques and we got rid of them. And so you really don't see those halos down here. But other than that, that picture was not changed with AI. This was actually done again. It's probably a 10-year-old photo in a normal camera, nothing fancy, but I just wanted people to see kind of how that works. All right. Whew, I didn't want to go too long here because I know you said we want to be out of here by,
Oh, amazing.
but I just wanted you to see that that's kind of what we're talking about nowadays is how to get your photos to pop and do things. And again, I'm sure some of you're doing this anyway. Other people are kind of nervous about going too far. And even when, we've talked about portraits on here, I should have shown you. I actually have some portraits where I routinely now will darken the parts around somebody
Yeah, that's what.
so
Yeah.
that they stand out a little more. And then I almost always, especially if I'm not using a flash, you have to go to their eyes, you have to brighten their eyes because again, we see their eyes looking perfectly normal standing there looking at them. The camera sees their eyes and goes, oh, those are kind of dark. Well, we have to bring that darkness back again. It's just the way the cameras work. It's not us, it's our tools, and we just have to know that the tools are going to do that.
Wow.
So
I mean, I don't even know what to say. I mean, thanks, Jim. That was amazing. I mean, you kicked off talking about directing people's vision, when it comes to relighting photos. I mean, which I thought was amazing. It's the fact that our eyes tend to go to the sort of brightest spots of the picture, and it's interesting because I think when you're talking about humans, when we're doing portraits, our eyes will go to other people's eyes. So it's important to make not only the person stand out, but also, like the wells of the soul, as it were. You moved on to talk about things like, the JPEGs versus the RAWs and the way that cell phones and our cameras, they don't ever see you don't ever see the RAW file on the back of the camera on your phone. You always see the JPEG image. It was interesting. You moved on to talk about things like, do professionals believe in editing? And I think given Christina Shirk, Ansel Adams, Jim Nix, Vanelli, Scott Kelby, Simon Childs, and so everyone else here, yeah, absolutely. And I think, what a spectacular ending with making your photos pop. Um, I mean, there's a couple of things. Do you know what? I think everybody there are multiple ways as Jim has demonstrated, to make our photos pop. And I think, I mean, do you know, I need to use linear gradient way more because I mean, I use radial gradients. I don't use linears quite so often, but what I tend to use is soft focus. So you can use things like bokeh or soft focus to make certain parts of the image stand out. You can use pattern, you can use color. All of these things are important, but I think you've done an amazing job today. You even managed to get the darkroom stuff in. My God, So yeah,
now, I will say, one of the other things that there's so many things you'd really, in an hour here, we can't really cover everything, but one of the other things that really works for me is sometimes I'll have like a butterfly and the background is kind of not working with the butterfly's colors. You can take that background and
that's
shift its colors so that you imagine the color wheel, and if the butterfly is yellow and orange, then it would make sense to have bluish colors in the background because that will set off the butterfly being complementary, being opposites. And so I'll do that with people a lot of times where if the background wall is just but they're wearing, let's say, a certain color red, then we know that the complementary is more of a green, and we can play around with that or go with something that's a close kind of color that also blends in with what they look like. So all of these little tricks you can play with color or contrast or brightness, all of these things, it's our job to tell people where to look. Because again, our brains don't work the same with a photo as they do with real life. Because standing in front of somebody, the other day, just one last thing I'll just mention. I was at a place where a woman was wearing a fluorescent safety vest, and I had to get her photo. And obviously, I see that this yellow is reflecting from her vest and getting to her face. But this is also true for photographers who have people sit on the grass, because the green grass, with its light, bounces up to their faces.
Yeah.
Now, you and I can sort of ignore that, because even though my brain said, yes, some of that yellow is bouncing up, when I took that picture with the safety vest, it's as if she had yellow skin. Or if you take somebody who's sitting on the ground and that green bounces up, your brain is pretty good at ignoring that green. And then you come home and you see that green face and you go, well, what did I do wrong? Nothing. That's the way your camera had to see it. So it's up to you then to go in and recolorize all of that stuff. So again, you just have to tell people, A, where to look, what's important, what's the stuff they should be focusing on. And I know it sounds like cheating, but again, if you're standing there, that's not the way it works. If you're standing in front of the Grand Canyon, you know exactly where to look.
Yep.
You take that same picture and people are like, they're looking all over and they're seeing a spot on the left-hand side where a piece of litter is on the rock. But if they were standing there, chances are they would have been overwhelmed with the overwhelming feelings of the Grand Canyon, which is huge, and they would ignore some of that. So we just have to tell people where to look.
I mean, I think what you mentioned about I just want to add to that, because what you said about the colors that we add into backgrounds, um, um, you know, looking at a color wheel, because I mean, there are many different types of color. You've got complementary, you've got dyadic, you've got triadic, you've got a whole ton of these things to experiment with. And I don't think I've ever seen it so eloquently put. Before we run the show, Jim and I, we had a chat last week, and Jim was showing me this stuff with, like the flowers against the wall. And I was like, oh, flipping out. Yeah, I think that there is, I mean, just from the transitions of some of those photos you've shown us today, that's pretty damn amazing. The amount of times over the years, and in a funny sort of way, when I think back to the days of the dark room, and I think back to the days before we had editing like we do now, oh my God, there was like, it's almost like back in those days, it wasn't just about being an artist. You had to be a proper technician. You had to be a proper skilled technician with not only, dexterity in terms of hitting a keyboard or being able to see what you want, but you really, oh my God, like Ansel Adams is a classic, because I remember Ansel Adams, again from years ago, he wrote a book about the print, the negative, and the camera, I think it was. The book about the negative, oh my God. I mean, again, his zone system. Ansel had found a way of manipulating his negatives or developing them in a kind of a very particular way that is, well, I mean, I wouldn't even attempt to go there. It's too blinking difficult, one of the things that you find, and again, I don't know whether people know this or not, but when you're developing black and white photos, they're fairly straightforward, because I mean, obviously we're going through like a scientific process now. So the chemistry that you're using, like the stop bath, the fixer, um, sorry, the developer stop bath and fix that sort of thing, they all had to be held at 20 degrees. Otherwise, I mean, if you were printing, it wasn't so bad. But if you're developing film, if, say, for argument's sake, you miscalculated the temperature of the liquid that, you know, like the developer that's gone in with the film, and say it just went like a few degrees, you'd either push or pull the film. So you'd either underexpose it or overexpose it. So my God, when I look back, it's funny now because I used to be passionate. There's a company, I don't know if anyone's heard of this company, called Hypnosis. They were famous for doing people like 10cc, Pink Floyd, Peter Gabriel, like loads and loads of these like 1970s, you know, kind of bands, album covers. And I was like, I've got a book knocking around here somewhere called, oh, I can't remember what it's called. It's called something like The Goodbye Look, I think it's called, by Hypnosis. And I look at their photos now and I'm like, yeah, right, well, do you know what? I would have knocked that out in the morning. Not even the morning. I would have knocked that out in 10 minutes now. The one that always gets me and the one that always makes me think, one of my favourite albums ever was Wish You Were Here by Pink Floyd. And on the front cover, they've got like two guys in suits and one's on fire. And do you know what? They'd actually filmed the shooting of that Pink Floyd album and they set some poor bugger on fire. You know, these days we don't have to do that. I'll tell you what, if I set, where's Liz? Is she still here? If I ever go to set Liz on fire, I won't be getting a can of petrol out. You know, oh yeah, where this, Liz? Yeah, you'll be all right. Don't worry about it. I'm just kidding, Liz. Don't worry. In all seriousness, I just think, you know, it's kind of funny. I mean, we have come, everything has moved so far, you know.
Right.
We, you know, there are lots of people that I hear saying, well, not say lots, so I suppose there are, but there are quite a few people that I hear saying, oh, we're purists. Do you know what? Whatever the camera sees is what we say. But it's not true, as Jim said. It's just not true, is it, Jim? It's not true. It's not what
Yeah,
I
and
see.
even when you were saying like today when you watch a movie and they blow up a building, that building is not blowing up. That's superimposed over the building, which has never been blown up.
Yep.
And then they will put that in front of that photo, and you think the building was exploding. And that's amazing. And I'll give you one other thing I wish we had more time today, but Serge Romelli, about 4 years ago, started, and he's the one that really got me understanding how much work is done between the original and a professional photo, because he started out by taking pictures of France because he lived in France, and he shows how he did it, and then he sells a bunch of presets and stuff to show you how to do it as well. And when you see how much work goes into those presets to relight different areas, now what the way he sells them is they have little sections which are already lit, some which are dimmed, and you have to move them around to the right places in your photo to make it look correct. Because obviously he doesn't know what your photo is going to look like. But he shows how he's been doing this for years, and he's made a very handsome living telling people how to relight their photos.
Yeah, you did right.
And I mean, now he's done this with I don't know how many. I mean, Tim Shields came out of his camp, and so have a lot of these others now that they're selling their products, doing the same thing, saying, here's what you need to do in order to make your photos pop. Because we all thought these photos just magically come out of the camera perfect. Now, I will say again, every now and then, like I don't know if this is true, but that one picture we saw of Ian's, I think it was, where it's two eagles fighting.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Now, the chances are that maybe that sky was perfectly blue and those birds were fighting and he nailed everything and that photo needed no work. It's gorgeous. Just leave it alone. On the other hand, if that wasn't the way it was and the birds were a little dark because one was facing into the light, one is outside of the light, then I would understand why you would go and relight that, because you need to fix that, where if you're standing there, the birds will look perfect to you. You put it on a camera and all of a sudden one bird looks a little darker because it's one stop difference in light. Well, to your eye, one stop means nothing, because our eyes are remarkable at what they can see in brightness and darkness. So you just ignore it, and your eye will think that's normal brightness, but your camera doesn't see it that way. It sees it as a very different brightness. So anyway, I do know, by the way, that they have been trying for years to make cameras that could do what our eyes do, and it is look in different areas for brightness, and the camera will adjust for that. I think cell phones are getting better and better at that. I'm sure it's all done computationally later, but they're really getting good at it. Our photos coming out of our cameras, not so good yet,
I'll tell you what, just before we wrap up tonight, guys, I just wanted to say thanks ever so much. What I'm going to be doing, I'm going to be sending out the, like the slide deck. I've created a mind map of Jim's presentation, just as we were, working. So I'm going to be sending that out, and I'm going to send it out in PDF format so that everyone, can read it. I mean, obviously, this evening, this evening has been powered by Aftershoot. I have to say this, I'm just kidding. No, it's been powered by Aftershoot, and I've got to say a massive thanks to the guys at Aftershoot. We've had some people come along tonight we haven't seen before, which is absolutely awesome. I'm gonna extend a welcome to Desi. So I know Desi, very well. Desi, you are welcome back at the group. And what I'll do is I'll put you onto the mailing list, because we'd love to have you along, and we'd love to see your photos and what have you. And I get the sense you might not be that fond of editing, but hey, do you know what? We'll get you fond of editing.
Thank you so much. That was like so useful.
That's really brilliant photographer. So it's not all about editing. We're also about the actual photography itself.
I just wanted to say thanks for everybody listening to my babbling there, because you never know. You don't want to get too much into one area, but if we ever get to a point where somebody wants to see some of these other things that are going on in the background, like some of these presets and whatever, I can show you what people are doing.
We're going to do
it is kind of interesting to see how they are working these things and then trying to sell them to you. But you can do the same things. It's just that it's a little different when you do them yourself.
So I think what we'll be doing next week, I've decided we're going to do something with optics next week. I'm just going to demonstrate this optics, and we'll just get on and we'll just play with it. Jim, if you've got some time next week, we could probably have a breakout room and go off and independently work on some photos doing optics, because I think optics, big scheme of things. I mean, how much is it in the Black Friday sale? They've got it about 25% off or what have you. And it is, I've never seen anything like this. It is beyond my wildest dreams. If you could imagine, having, say, like a photo effect or an overlay or something that you put on the image that, say it's smoke, for argument's sake. I mean, smoke's a little bit easy. Say you've got some sort of magical sparkly particles. You can move them in real time. They'll actually, you can make them move. You can make the smoke move. You can wrap it. You can mask it. You can combine it with other effects. I mean, the shot that I did of Elizabeth, this, the beauty, the mathematics of beauty, this is just like one of the sort of overlays, and the amount of control that you have with this Boris FX stuff is insane. I mean, it's just like
Can I just say something that maybe this will also help people sort of imagine why it's different? When you were talking about Phobos their stuff is basically a printed overlay.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
The difference between this company is because they made almost everything for video.
Yeah.
Imagine you have a sparkler and you just light it.
That's it.
And when it starts, it's just starting with a little bit of sparkly stuff around it, but as it gets going, more sparks are around it. Or lightning, when it first starts, it's a single streak, but then maybe becomes more. What makes Boris different is you have control of its lifespan. In other words, you can show it as it's just starting, or you can travel along its lifespan, and as it becomes more and more intense, you get to change all the parameters. How many lightning bolts would you like? 31. It's up to you. Do you want it to just be starting out of the sky, or do you want it coming down, hitting several things? So you're given controls that you don't normally get in most things that you buy, which are textures and those kinds of, they're just fixed. This program basically is a motion program for photographers, but because it was built with motion, you can adjust its lifespan, which that's really a big difference.
You know, I've never, I mean, it's, I don't know. I mean, I work with other programs, as we know. And, you know, well, I mean, there's some great programs out there. You know, I've got wonderful overlays, got wonderful backgrounds and all that, but nothing. I mean, oh God, I'm probably biased, but I've never seen anything like it. Never seen any.
I will say the only problem with it is its masking is very different and very confusing at first.
Yeah.
And it is, when you first start to use it, you go, well, how do I get rid of this part of the mask? How do I make this happen? And you wind up having to go through a lot of videos until somebody explains to you its oddities, because it's not like what I was doing today is real easy to just add a little, take away a little, to do this, to do that. But After Effects is a little different. And so I'm not After Effects, but this what do they call that one?
It's complex. I mean, there is some complexity to this, but in fairness, I think it's a good thing. I think it's a good thing to have a learning curve like this, because the sort of masking that it's got, rather than how can I put it? I mean, you're still painting with, you know, like black and white and all of that sort of thing, you know, black conceals, white reveals. But the way that you get there might be through something they call subtraction. You might be subtracting like one mask from another. And believe it or not, this subtraction is in Photoshop, it's in loads of programs. It's just a little bit more advanced. But I think, you know, it's like anything. Once you work on this stuff and once you see it's explained, or you see someone else do it, I think it makes like a real big difference. But guys, on that note, I better wrap it up here. But I just wanted to say thank you to everyone for coming along. Wonderful to see Desi. Wonderful to see Mona back with us. One of the best graphic designers I've ever met, Mona King. And also wonderful to have my beautiful assistant Elizabeth over here. You know, hey, cracking model. You know, fantastic assistant as well on this. She's oh, actually, I'm not going to make any snide jokes about the other session, but hey, whatever. Guys, I just want to say thank you ever so much for coming along, and I look forward to seeing all of you, I hope, next Tuesday, when we're going to be talking about Boris FX optics. So, and I can't forget our sponsors for this evening, Aftershoot. So thank you very much, Aftershoot. You know, thanks for putting our details out on your website and the support that you've given us. What can I say? See you later, guys. Thanks ever so much. You'll all have a safe week, and I reckon that some of us will be meeting up at Luminar tomorrow. So until then, see you later. Thanks, guys.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Thanks, Jim.
See ya.
Oh,
it was great.
Excellent work, Jim. Absolutely excellent stuff. Yeah,
well, you know, it's a little different. That's the stuff that I've been working on the last several years to really make things better. You know, it's, you know,
awesome presentation as well. And the bit beforehand, I just thought, oh my God, that's fantastic. Yeah, you really.
Well, and as I say, I actually have a whole bunch of these things that are marked up from the dark room. And as you were saying that, I went, you know, I got to get that in there. So I had to scramble to get them from one computer to the other and get them in that presentation at the beginning, because I think it made sense to show that, because otherwise people really don't know how much work went into the darkroom days. It was, you know, again, yes, people, in fact, I think they call the old photos where you don't do anything, they're called vintage photos or something like that, where they're basically, you just shoot them, you show them. And if that's what again, I didn't want to get into that, but if that's what you want, then just show them. You know, if it's just your relatives and you're not interested in doing anything else, that's the picture, show it. But if you're trying to make a statement or you're trying to stand out, then you really do have to do a little more with your photos.
Oh, no, absolutely. I mean, you know, like I said, I think you demonstrated that really well tonight. I love the transitions that you've made. I mean, we're going to have to come back to this in future sessions, just with this relighting, because there's so much to this. I mean, just in terms of landscapes, full stop and what have you. Yeah, there
like
is.
I would love to do that picture that you had with the waterfall, and I never really.
I'm going to send it. I'm right, Jim. I'll send it over to you, please. Yeah, go on, relight it. Okay, fair play.
And then that in color changes in the foliage, and to do things just to make.
Oh, all right. So
really
show me how you've done it afterwards, or do it on here. Do it again. We'll have another evening. Well, I mean, I'll send you the picture anyway, but demonstrate how you're going to change it. That'd be fantastic.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. So anyway, okay.
All right then. See you
next week. I don't know if I can make next week. I think I have a test that I've got to take.
Don't worry, that's okay.
And but if not, we'll come up. But I would love to see your stuff on Boris, so be sure you record it.
I'll record
because
it.
I say I like it. It's just that I've had some bogging problems. Like